Good morning, happy Friday. I'm so glad to see you here. If you are new here, then welcome. My name is Maddie and I'm a science fiction and fantasy author working on my debut novel. And if you are not new here, then thank you so much for coming back. It means the absolute world to me and I'm so thankful to have you here. We are switching things up this week with an anecdotal writing craft video instead of a vlog. Am I qualified to give writing advice? Debatable. I am working on my first novel, but I do have a degree in creative writing, so take that as you will. And I think that, as with most things in life, this is all subjective. Again, it's anecdotal to my experiences with writing and what I have kind of compiled into what works for me and what helps me in my writing journey. So if any of these do not resonate with you, or you have different ways, different perspectives, or different ways of looking at things, then that is totally fine. But I think they are things that have helped me make my stories better. I was talking with my bestie and roommate, and he wants to work on a story as well, and was asking me about how I structure chapters and when I decide to end them and things like that. So I compiled all my thoughts and notes, and I have those on my Notion, which I love Notion so much, and I think if you have problems keeping yourself organized, you gotta use it. Chapter structure, we're gonna get into that now. So what I like to do is to start with action rather than emotion or world building. Even if it's a small action, like reaching or grabbing for something, just something that is active and getting immediately into what the character is doing, and then building the context and emotion around that. And number two is making sure I include tension shifts. And that's what I'm saying. You don't need to start with no tension and add it in the end. If you write a really good cliffhanger chapter, just continue that tension then on the following chapter and then follow that through. You don't have to break it and then build it back up, because you've already done the work of building it up. So sustain it and then you can have it drop off. Number three, this is really popular writing advice as well, and that is stop before the very end of the scene. It is called in media res, in the middle of the action. That's where you want to start, and you want to end before you get that full resolution, especially in the middle of the book, so you're not cutting away from your own tension and that rising conflict and stakes that you want people to have, so they stay invested and they are just have to read the next chapter, even if it's 3 a.m. and they work at 7 a.m. I love scene breaks to cut out the boring stuff. If a character needs to get from point A to point B, we don't need to see the car ride unless it's important. If a day passes or 5 days pass where it's just kind of this purgatory state for your characters, cut it out. Just do a scene break. I love scene breaks. They're awesome. I love seeing them in books. They are all over the place in my chapters. I have 2 to 3 scenes that are the majority of my chapters. I have very few that are just one single scene. And if you do use a lot of scene breaks, you can use that single scene to be a really hard-hitting scene. So it just play around with not having every chapter set up the same, where it's just one scene, one scene, one scene, one scene. Just switch it up, get that variety going. Just in line with that is ending the chapter when all the pertinent information has been shared, and I think that goes also into just avoiding the info dumping and dragging down your words that readers would start to skim through, because it's not really interesting in the way it's being told, or it's not directly involved with what your characters are going through, what they need to learn, what they need to do. Finally, utilizing scene breaks to cut places for tension, time skips, character interactions. Just play around with that and get to a place where you feel comfortable. I think that scene breaks are definitely a part of my writing style, that there will be nothing I write unless it's short flash fiction that does not have a scene break. I just wanted to share what my current chapter outlining process has been as I've gone through this current round of rewrites. I took the time to re-outline my novel after I got all my editor feedback, But if you want to watch that video, you can watch it here. So I have a little synopsis for each chapter, and so as I've been writing these chapters through this round, I will start by just reading over the synopsis, reorienting myself with where I am and where I want to go for the chapter. I will go through and answer my questions, and I do write them down or just type it out. Even though some of them are very similar and they tie in together, for me it just changes slightly the perspective in which I'm going to answer the questions, so I feel like I'm just getting like a more fully immersive experience and making sure I'm working through any of those problems where they arise. And it doesn't have to be like full sentences. It's not for like school, no one's gonna grade you, so you can just jot down bullet points or shorthand everything, whatever works for you. After that, I build the plot, and it's just a little bit more detailed than the synopsis, going through details that I need to hit, more of a flow of action and character rather than just like this happens and then this happens and then this happens. Just kind of building that fully immersive experience, and then finally getting into writing the chapter. And I don't really worry. Again, I'm going to do a line edit in September, so I don't really worry about like if something is worded awkwardly, and even if I'm like, wow, this is so weird to read, I'll just put in a comment like, hey, this makes no sense to me even now and I just wrote it. So when I go back through, I'll be able to pinpoint, right away what needs to be worked on the most and fix it up. I have found there are 7 questions that I ask myself when building chapters and editing chapters as well. Question number 1, what is the goal of this chapter? Through my last reread and in this rewriting process, there were a few chapters where I found myself just asking myself, like, what was the end goal here? What was the point of writing this? Because it was either just like an exchange of information or nothing really happened. We didn't learn anything new about the characters or their motivations and goals. It was just kind of there. And to create a strong, compelling book, every line, every scene, and every chapter has to matter and has to advance character development or plot, whatever that may be. And there are a wide variety of things that fall into that category, but really everything has to have an end goal. Everything we do, every action we make has a goal, whether it's really small, like if you are hungry and you want to be full, you're gonna get food and that's your goal. So just like that, everything we write has to have a goal, and every chapter has to have a finish line in a sense. And the second question really ties directly into that, and that is, does every part of this matter? Again, like I said, with reading these chapters, there were scenes or pieces of the book that I just found myself asking, what was the point? Nothing exciting happens here, and there is no new information learned or given, so it's just kind of rehashing things we already know or going into things that we don't need to know, and that pulls away from the tension and buildup of the conflict in the story. Question number 3 is, how does this further the plot? If you are writing a character-driven story, of course, more of the emphasis is going to be on character, but they are still an active participant in their world, and they are still driving the plot forward, whether or not the plot has higher stakes or lower stakes. I tried to put so much into earlier drafts that instead of furthering my main plot or advancing and developing side plots that are juxtaposed with the main plot, it was going in a maze, like there would be dead ends, and then you'd have to turn around and go this way and that way. So not everything was advancing the plot that I wanted to be advanced. And there is a way to include a lot of different themes or ideas, but they all have to have that same end goal of advancing plot A, tying in plot B to plot C to plot A, what have you. It just needs to continue moving forward. Which brings us to question number 4. How does this show or further character development? Something that I saw and was shown to me by having a fresh set of eyes on earlier drafts was I didn't have a strong character arc, because her change, my protagonist's change, was not evident through the beginning to the middle to the end, since she always carried these ideas and beliefs. So everything we then learn and everything that she has put through isn't as hard hitting, because we aren't seeing this change in ideology or this change in belief. It's just kind of a constant going from quiet to loud about these same beliefs. And I definitely don't want that. I wanted a really strong, tragic arc. So that has been something I've been really focusing on for this rewrite, is showing someone who is supposed to be and close to being self-actualized, and putting them through situations and forcing them to confront these beliefs that they want to believe but they can't fully commit to, that would make them like a fully self-actualized, arc completed human being, and seeing that slow descent into tragedy. Sometimes it really does take having someone else who is like not connected to the story like you are, because we as writers, we're so connected to what we're writing that there are going to be things we miss, and that's one of the great things about getting a third party involved and helping you with advice and editing and anything like that. Question number 5. This is one I use more for outlining, keeping track of what side plots are being introduced, and making sure that if one is being introduced, it's going to be followed through on, and it's going to have a resolution by the end of the book or by the end of the series. Anything like that, you just got to keep track of it. Make sure you're not going in 10 million different directions. Keep it simple and keep it all focused mainly on plot A. Number 6, this one is so important, and that is there any foreshadowing? There are things that I wrote into my second half that have no foreshadowing in the first half, because I didn't know it existed when I was writing the first half. And so this one is a great question to keep in mind as you're editing, because now that you know point A to point Z, you know if you need to bring up something a little bit earlier and get that seed planted in the reader's mind that, hey, something is about to change here, or something isn't right with this, or make sure you're keeping this in mind, just so you can make sure all of these twists and turns, or things that help your protagonist or hinder your protagonist, feel earned and natural, and they're not just out of the blue and have no basis in the rest of the story. My final question that I keep in mind is, does this include enough world building without info dumping? I think there are so many good videos here on YouTube about finding that balance between introducing world building and just straight out info dumping. This is one, I think it's so important to study contemporary literature, because classics, you know, it was just written in a different time, and there is a lot of just like setting, world building, and then getting into plot. And while classics are amazing, I don't think we should always be looking at them for writing craft, and definitely checking out just whatever you read, kind of seeing what works and what doesn't, what you find yourself skimming over and what you find yourself really invested in, is the best way, I think, to learn the difference between that. And I really feel like I tend to be an underwriter when it comes to world building as well. So that is another thing to keep in mind, is there anything that does not make sense to someone who is going into this blind, who doesn't know your world, because we have, you know, everything in the back of our minds, like, to make it make sense. So again, that comes, getting a third pair of eyes really comes into play with saying, like, this makes no sense to me, and being like, oh yeah, that would make sense because I didn't give you any information. I posted on my community tab my goals for this week in writing. I have not met them exactly, but that's okay. I am happy with the progress that I'm making, and this is the first week of that I'm holding myself to such like a regimented routine. So it's only the first week. I have 3 more weeks to figure it out, so I'm confident that I'll be able to catch up and get myself back on track. It's just like this little learning curve right now. But yeah, that is this week's video. This is kind of starting that diversification of my content, so it's not just like a vlog every week, and then I start off really strong and I'm like, oh my god, I'm really tired, and then, you know, we kind of like stall. So we're diversifying content, trying new things. If you enjoyed, I would love to know your thoughts about what you use or what you think about to build chapters, scenes, what you find are the most important things to focus on. If you want to drop a like or subscribe to my channel. Either way, thank you so much for watching, especially getting to this point. I will see you in next week's video, and have a spectacular week until then. Bye.